Hey, what's up, everybody? So, let me see here. I'm gonna bring myself into here. There we go. Boom. Start listening. There we go. And invite myself as a co-host here. There we go.
Welcome to JavaScript Jam Live. Okay, boom. DB, what's up, dude? Welcome. All right. Just trying to get my bearings here. Everything looks to be good. Perfect. All right. Welcome to JavaScript Jam Live. This is where we talk about everything JavaScript and web development related. We do this every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and we have a good time doing it. If you're out there in the audience and you're a beginner, or you've been doing this for a very long time, either way, we want to hear from you. We really do. Like, seriously. So get up here. No, I'm kidding. We really want to hear from you guys. So feel free to click on the bottom left-hand corner there and request to come up. What's up, Brad? What's going on? Thanks for coming. Just request to come up, and we're more than happy to have you, whether you want to state an opinion, ask a question, say something about the current topic at hand, whatever. Feel free. We'd love to hear from you. Today, we had, really yesterday, mainly, we had V conference going on. That was interesting. We might touch on that a little bit. Yeah, it was interesting how they did this 24-hour thing with it, where they went on from 9 a.m. yesterday to 9 p.m. And then it was like after that, at least that's what the schedule showed, right? And then after that, for the next 12 hours, making it 24 total, they re-streamed those talks. I believe that's how they did it, which is kind of interesting. And I guess that's so, like everybody all around the world could have it at a time that's convenient for them, which is pretty cool. Definitely thought out for sure. So yeah, Ishan will be joining us here shortly. Looking forward to having him jump on here with us. As always, we're going to have some great conversations. Looks like we have a request from Brad. What's up, bro? Bring you on. That is a speaker. There we go. Brad, connecting. There's always a nice delay.
Hey, Scott.
Hey. Oh, man. Long time no talk. How you doing?
Yeah, I've been chilling in the audience these last few weeks. I was off with COVID, unfortunately. Which on the good side, I caught it at a React Conf. So a few weekends ago, we had React Alicante down here in Spain.
Right.
Some good talks, and some good people there. I got an unfortunate takeaway from the conference. So, but yeah, coming back from that. So. And yeah, no, I was just chatting about VCom, so I thought I'd jump on the board. Unfortunately, I missed it, but I saw the recording was up, basically what you were just saying there, the 24-hour thing today. So I was like, oh, it's it's still up on YouTube. I'll play it back later. And just a couple of hours ago, I went to do that, and it's gone now. So they've took it down once it's finished, and they're gonna put the videos up later.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think they took the stream down, and then they. Hopefully they put it back up on YouTube, like in individual talks or something, or
They were saying that in the chat last, like we'll let you know on Twitter or something when they've got all the chapters put up on as individual videos. Yeah. Yeah, looking forward to seeing that. All I saw was the Dino talk about Dino deploy with V, which pretty cool.
Yeah, there was lots of good ones with different frameworks. You know, with Vite. So
yeah. I know there were some big names up in there in the sponsors. I was like, yeah, you're gonna get some pretty good content from that.
Yeah, for sure. There was definitely some big names. Awesome. So, anybody else in the audience participate or attend Vite yesterday or this morning or last night when they were streaming it over again? Feel free to raise your hand if you want to come up. All right, so I'm just going to finish my little spiel here. So, like I said, if you're a beginner or you've been here or you've been doing this for a long time, you know, on JavaScript or development, web development in general, it doesn't matter. We want to hear from you. So feel free to put your hand up, come on up. And in fact, that's when we get some of the most value out of this. Just like when Brad raised his hand and came up here and started talking. We love it when you guys do that. You know, we love to have you guys participating and you know, joining us up here. So we've definitely gotten some really good talks when it comes to that. Yeah. So I know Ishan should be here in a couple minutes, and you can really kick things off even more so. But let's see here. So speaking of ViteConf, I know there were some good talks that I was looking forward to checking out as well. And so was Ishan. There was like the which one was it? There's so many good ones in here. And actually I heard a lot of people saying that the like shorter talks were actually like really good, right? Maybe
right.
because it was just like so jam-packed, you know, with good stuff in such a short period of time, you know, instead of kind of spread out over 10, 15, 20 minutes or whatever. So,
yeah, I must say where I was the weekend at React Alicante, it's the same for the talks there. There's got long talks, but what they call the lightning ones, where it's like I think 15, 20 minutes or something instead of 40, 50 minutes. It's
right.
I guess the person put on the talk has got so much to share, and they like cramp it down into this smaller presentation, but there's still like so much value in there, and you come out of that talk, or I did anyway, feeling like, oh, you know, you'll learn a lot there. When you're in these longer ones and it's say more about one topic, I mean, they provide you with value, obviously, but it's spread out a bit. You know, there's more space to be putting some memes and jokes in there and stuff. Whereas the lightning ones is like, boom, straight to the point. You know, I'm talking about this and this is what it is, sort of thing. But I don't know if it's based on the same sort of idea, but yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And some of these were even really short. Like there were several that are like 4, 5, 6, 8 minutes long.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it's interesting how much, if they actually stuck to the 6-minute talk, or if if that was literally it, like, because I don't know, some of these are probably pre-recorded, I would imagine, right?
Right.
And so, yeah, that would be interesting to hear, like how much value they put out there in like 6 minutes. But I know a couple JavaScript jams ago, we were talking about Tauri, Tauri, excuse me, for helping to build better apps for, you know, like native applications and things like that.
Right.
But there's a talk here on desktop apps actually utilizing Tauri. It looks like, or Tauri, however you would say it, which that would have been cool to check out as well. But I know a big one, the Ishan one to listen to, which was a panel that they have, which is the frameworks panel. It included like Daniel Rowe, Ben McCann, Brett Little,
Nice.
a few of those folks, right? So that was like a 45-minute panel essentially. But I bet that was a really good conversation. I'll be looking forward to listening, to that when that comes out, hopefully soon as well. Yeah. Feel free to come on up if you want to talk, or if you were interested in Vite or anything else you want to bring up. But yeah, it looks like there was also so you were speaking about the Dino and Vite. Yeah, it's like there was like a 5-minute. That was supposed to be 5 minutes long. Like, man.
Oh yeah, that's what I mean. They were like showing literally what the title says. You know, there's no going around like deep into what Dino was or anything. And like that's the only thing I've seen of it. And some chatter from like the the presenters, sort of, however you call them. But yeah, and it was literally, showing you in from a code perspective, like getting up a Dino built app with Vite and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, there's Bun and Vite is on here too, but that's a 3-minute conversation. Oh, looks like someone's requesting here. Let's see. There we go. What's up? Looks like you're still connecting here. We'll give it a chance to catch up. Can you hear us? Looks like you're muted there. You can hit the little mic button. Come off mute if you'd like. How do you pronounce your name?
Hi, good evening. My name is Rahma.
Hi, is it Rahma? Okay, cool.
Rahma, yes. Right. I'm sort of
good to hear from you.
Okay, I think.
Don't be nervous.
Yeah, I think it's kind of hard for me to relate with all that you guys have been talking about. I'm kind of like a beginner. Well, not really a beginner. I've been learning on and off for about 2 years. It's been more of a hobby for me, trying to understand JavaScript and build really cool projects with it. So recently I've tried to do more with Node.js, and it's been a really tough ride. I tried to take this approach of looking at APIs and SDKs and seeing what I can really just put together. So that kind of forces me to, learn beyond what I already know. So I think there's a whole lot to learn. It gets really overwhelming, and I would just like to hear from you guys. What do you think about that approach of mine? I think it's been the easiest way for me to not get discouraged. Yeah, so.
Absolutely, that's a great question, and I'm so glad that you came up. Yeah, no need to be nervous. Thank you so much for that awesome question. We love hearing from people, whether they're beginners or they've been doing this for a long time, and it doesn't matter. So thanks again. Yeah, so I'd say you're doing the right thing. You're taking action, right? You're moving in the step of trying to get uncomfortable, because if you're comfortable, you're not learning, right? If you're uncomfortable, you're learning, and you're becoming someone that you weren't before, right? So that's really cool that you're making that transition for yourself, and not just that, you've realized that, hey, I can't be sitting in the same spot, otherwise I'm not going to get anywhere, right? So whether it's looking into Node.js and doing that like you've been doing, or whether it's Ishan, I sent you the co-host invite, or whether it's looking into APIs, or whatever, like you said, right? And yes, it can get overwhelming just because there's so many different things out there, so many different platforms, and so many different frameworks, and all these different things, right? Especially when it comes to JavaScript. There's just so many things out there, but you're doing the right thing of just taking the action and getting started. in those particular areas. Now, Node.js, obviously, that's more like kind of like back end of JavaScript, right? And then there's front end of JavaScript, which is more like React or any of these other like frameworks that are out there for the front end. There's a lot, right, to choose from. Or there's just hey, vanilla JS, vanilla JavaScript, which is like just no framework, plain old vanilla JavaScript is what it's called. So if you want to learn that too, that might be something to look up. Granted, nowadays you could get hired by a company just from learning a framework and not even knowing JavaScript. So will it help you in your career to know vanilla? Yeah, but there's other people up here that are way more qualified to talk about this than I am. I'm probably just as much as a beginner up here as a lot of people. So with that, I would love to introduce our co-host Ishan, who's going to take us into maybe a little bit on what he recommends for someone who's really been doing this for a couple of years, but they're wanting to get more into learning more and they're taking some action, but maybe you have some suggestions for Rahma, right? Rahma, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Sorry I'm late. So the question is basically how to take it to the next level in your experience in web development. Is that correct?
Yeah, they're still very much a beginner, she said, but yes, exactly.
What does beginner mean? HTML, CSS, no JavaScript. HTML, CSS, some JavaScript.
There you go. Yeah, good question.
Yeah, there's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Although I try to learn the frameworks, but I just don't find it really interesting as much as I find it interesting trying to grasp the plain JavaScript, the vanilla JavaScript. So that's been pretty much it. Just HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript.
Okay. And then do you have a specific goal in mind? Like, I want to get hired, or I want to get promoted, or I want to work on websites, or I want to work on web applications, like I want to build the equivalent of Gmail in the browser, or I just want to make nice looking websites that are fast. Like, what are your goals?
So I think I can't really say for goals, but the things I find, should I say, interesting or fascinating is being able to build tools for education. So I've been looking at a number of, should I say, startups that do stuff like that make learning really way easier. For example, we have Riplet. It's this they have an IDE which is more than an IDE. It's very good for learning, for kids to learn, and so stuff like that, tools like that. Although I know I can't just build stuff like that at one go. I'd have to start small, but I'm looking towards being able to, at some point, be able to put together things like that.
Got it. Okay, that's really helpful. And a Replit, I think, is the in-browser IDE. So that's really helpful. So so here's the tension. I love that you're interested in vanilla JavaScript. A lot of people want to jump straight to the frameworks, and it's great to have that background and that foundation for what vanilla JavaScript is. So I would make sure vanilla JavaScript, but not let perfect be the enemy of the good. Like, feel like it decently well enough to add it to a website and sprinkle some level of interactivity onto it. Things like how click handlers work, how closures work, know some of the key things like spread operators and arrow functions, which get used by a lot of the frameworks. But then if you want to be building tools like Replit and similar, those always are going to typically require a higher end framework like a React or a Vue, just because if you try to manage all the complexity of things that are happening on the page with vanilla JavaScript, it really becomes hard to keep track of that from a code standpoint. So I would still say it's good to have a stepping stone in between where you are today to building a full-on like replit. It might be, pick a web page with some minor level of interactivity and say, I'm going to try and code a version of this. And then the next step would be, go through, there's some good examples of kind of the higher level interactivity using simple examples with frameworks. Like the classic one is to-do lists. There's a great site, To-Do MVC, which shows you how to write a to-do application in multiple frameworks. I wouldn't try to learn that across all the different frameworks. I would pick one framework or maybe two that you're considering between, and look at both versions of that to-do application in both those languages and see which one seems to appeal and make the most sense to you. I would also pick the framework that seems to have, the largest ecosystem for, where you're at, either geographically or the space you're in. And then pick one of those and start learning a framework like React or Vue or Angular. And then the thing that I think will help move you forward is like building projects. So you get your hands dirty on stuff and setting a project to build, and it's not only something you can show, but it makes when you read the concepts in a book, it's not the same when you actually play with them. And that would be kind of my immediate advice. The only other thing I'd say is there's a lot of great online resources, maybe potentially too many, but especially like YouTube has a lot of great tutorials of various areas. You could almost Google any particular framework and just say crash course or getting started or for beginners, and you'll find some piece of content that'll help you get started. Let me pause there and see if that helps, or maybe you already knew all that.
No, I think that was good advice. But another thing to think about also if you're uninterested in frameworks, maybe diving into the why behind the frameworks would be a good idea. Like, for example, exploring concepts around state management and why the frameworks are used and why state management is tied so closely to them, which lets you make an application like Replit. Even when it comes to making a Replit clone, that's not a difficult project to even start with. That's something you can definitely do. Whiteboard it out, put your cards together. What this looks like on the basic level. You need the editor. You need to be able to show what's happening on the right side of the screen. That's your basic functionality, and then you need to be able to save in real time at the end of each editing. So like you're working through everything you need to build every fundamental application you're ever going to touch in the future. But understanding the concepts around state management is really the core to why it's so important to use that framework, why we even use them in the first place, and how interactivity is done. I think that would really help out with giving you like motivation towards moving towards a framework. Now, I think that we're biased because we always talk about React and Next.
Yeah.
But Vue is I feel like a much more friendlier starting point. It also cuts up the code in a different way that's easier to understand. It's also worth exploring. I learned, the concepts around this with Angular, a little bit different. It wasn't necessarily the same type of state management it is today, but it also helped out because it followed a lot of the previous concepts that older MVC frameworks followed. But in your case, I think that because of how much there is out there around React and how easy it is to access resources, that's probably your best starting point. And just research into things like Redux or how to use React's context library if you're looking for basic state management. And it'll really help you kind of get to where you're going. But if Replit's the goal, start with Replit. That's definitely an achievable project, even as a beginner.
Just so I'm clear, so I think that's a great call out to understand the why. Are you suggesting coding up something like Replit using vanilla JavaScript as a project? And the reason I ask is I feel like it's doable, but I feel like you might, if you because there's so many components that do pieces of it that you can stitch together, there can be a more immediate sense of like less work getting it done, but you may not understand the principles if you just pieced it together. Like you can find an autocomplete component for Vue or React and stitch it together that way. But I'm curious, what were you proposing there?
I think I find that really interesting. Yeah. I'm surprised I've never thought about that before. So yeah, I think it's on top of my to-do list already. I'll just try to see how much I can get done in that regard. Thank you.
Okay, well, I hope we helped out there. So Scott, I think you probably did the intro already. For folks, this is obviously JavaScript Jam Live. We are an open mic, so feel free to raise your hand, and we'll bring you to the stage. And feel free to introduce a topic, just like an open mic. But we have a few things that we always come prepared for. Have you guys started walking through that list already, Scott, or should I take it away?
Yeah, no, we haven't. Feel free.
Okay.
Although we did touch a little bit on vConference, but we didn't go too far in depth or anything. I mean, we just kind of touched on a couple of things, like how it was laid out, what they, a few talked about a couple of the talks that they were had on the list, but other than that, we didn't really get into anything. And nobody here that we know of has went to it or saw it or participated in it.
Yeah, I'll just say it had a really impressive lineup, which I'm sure you probably already covered. And the talk I most wanted to watch was actually the frameworks panel. It had like a who's who. You had, Daniel Rowe talking from Nuxt, who's actually been a speaker for JavaScript Jam at the Composability Summit. You had Fred Schott from Astro, who's been on the JavaScript Jam podcast. You had Ryan Carniato from Solid.js, also who's been on the JavaScript Jam podcast. Misko Hevery, who's creator of AngularJS and now Quick.js, which is an impressive, interesting framework. So it was a really impressive lineup. I look forward to them publishing a recording, because that's the one I definitely wanted to tune into and see more about. So hopefully they'll post those recordings and we'll be able to get a chance to watch them. I misinterpreted, as it seems like many did, the format, and I thought I'd be able to watch it a little bit more after the fact, but it is what it is. So moving on. And do you have the link for the newsletter, Scott? We can just post up there.
Yeah, I can grab it.
Yeah.
I'll tweet it first.
Okay, perfect. So, speaking of frameworks, there was a site somebody recently created and blogged about called What the Framework. And its lofty goal is helping you pick the framework for your next project. And, what's interesting is you might think, as I think a lot of us do, it feels like every week there's a hot new JavaScript framework every week. But she actually argued, the creator, that there's a gap in the ecosystem, more gaps than you might think. And you kind of have to make this really hard decision about whether your site is going to be a multi-page app, so it's more like a classic website, or it's going to be a single page app. And if you want to do both of those, or if you're going to blend between the two of those, she's like, you've got fewer options than she's like, I thought. There's basically, I think she outlines, and you also want server-side rendering. And so she found there weren't as many options as you might think. But I think it might be useful for us to just take a stab. And if you want, go ahead and try the website out yourself. We'll kind of walk through it live. It's a very simple, it's an open source site. It's called whattheframework.dev, all one word. And the flowchart's actually pretty simple. So when you first land on it, it asks you which of three different types of sites you're trying to build. And one of the things I liked is it doesn't even ask you, how I just even phrased the question, because I phrased it as an expert, so to speak. Do you want a multi-page app or a single page app? It's really contextualized to something that even a non-technical user potentially could understand. So the questions that are asked are, is it a content-based website that provides the same content and experience in every visit? And I know what that means technically. Like I would phrase that kind of instinctively as, is this a single multi-page app that's highly cacheable? Right. But this is a much better, more plain English explanation for it. And then the other, two options are a website where most of the content is the same for everyone, but may also need to cater for unique content on visits to certain pages, which is really saying, hey, I'm going to personalize some parts of it. And then the third is a website that needs to provide a custom and dynamic content for each visitor. So an example of that might be something like like Gmail, or I log into a dashboard of some kind, and it's only the information for me about my stats that I'm looking at. Or maybe it's like Twitter or Facebook, where the entire experience every time you log in is custom for that particular user, their feed, and maybe even for that point in time. And it looks like we've got a request. There we go. There's Matt. So follow along if you want. Whattheframework.dev. And if you pick your website is the first option, website provides the same content and experience in every visitor, then its recommendation is right there for you already. Your website is probably a static site made of pre-rendered HTML pages and static assets. And I thought was really interesting is did not use the buzzword, which is Jamstack, which is how a lot of people would historically describe this. So that's a website where all the pages are basically built right when you deploy the site. And anytime somebody comes visits the site, the CPU, the computer doesn't have to do any work, doesn't run any code. It really just serves up that HTML, the same HTML to every visitor who visits that URL. And there's a lot of options here. So you get your classic ones like that people know, like 11D, but frameworks like Gatsby, Next, Nuxt, Redwood, even Angular support this. Astro is also called out, which is, I believe, what this site is built on, and then Docusaurus. What's interesting about some of these is some of them support both purely static and some of them support regular. And then the other one, if you go back to the homepage and you say, my website is more, content is the same for everyone, but I might need to personalize some parts of it. So maybe it's like an e-commerce site. The next question it asks, it's probably the most technical question. It says your website is probably a hybrid site. And they ask, do you need to maintain state across multiple pages? Which, harkens back to what we were talking about earlier with Daniel's answer, like understanding state. And again, things I like here is they highlight examples. So examples of sites that you probably know that maintain state across multiple pages: Gmail, Discord, Twitter. As you navigate through Gmail, Discord, and Twitter, it needs to know, like if you go back to the previous email, what you did there, or you're through multiple complex operations. Replit would be an example of this. And so if you click that, it says, your site is probably suited to a single page application, in which case your options are, they recommend Blitz, Gatsby, Next, Nuxt. If you say no, and the examples they give are sites like Google, BBC, and Amazon, right? Google's a good example. It's going to give you different results to different users, depending on what they type in the search results. But you don't need to maintain state across multiple pages, other than maybe if you're on the third page versus the first page of search results. You don't need to, Google as of yet doesn't show you like, here are the things you searched for, over the last 5 days, although they actually do for certain users. But let's leave that aside. So if you say no, then you're a multi-page application. You don't need to maintain state between them. So 11D and Redwood are example frameworks that are called out. And then there's, if you go back to the homepage again and you say, Does your website need to provide custom content for each visitor? Then again, it asks if you need to maintain state. And if it does, then now we're getting to the ones that we're all familiar with for very multi-page JavaScript heavy clients. So React, Angular, Vue, Svelte, Solid, Blitz, Nuxt, Ember, Remix, Preact. And if you don't need to maintain state, you can look at frameworks like Quick and Astro and Redwood. So hopefully you guys are following along there. The first thing is I want to just pause and see if there are any thoughts or any questions. And then I want to just see with our speakers here, is there anything you agree or disagree with in terms of how they cut up the landscape, in terms of the question asked? Did they miss a question they should have asked? And then in terms of the recommendations, did anybody feel like the recommendations they disagreed with? Like, no, I don't think that framework was appropriately categorized.
I just had something I wanted to add on the topic of framework. So in my hunt for the best static site generator this weekend, I was playing around with Zola. I was actually initially started playing around with Astro, and then I just kind of stumbled into Zola. It is built in Rust, and it is extremely simple and straightforward, and it's essentially everything I wanted from Gatsby. So I'm a couple of days into playing with it, but so far I'm loving it.
Oh wow, that's really interesting. Well, first off, you should make a GitHub pull request for Hacktoberfest, which we're in the middle of, to add this to
do it
to what the framework. I don't see Zola. Let me go back. Let me see.
Yeah, I don't see it either. And something that's even more interesting is they have layer 0 in their docs.
Zola has layer 0 in their docs.
Yeah, it's getzola.com.
Oh,
or
I'm on
getzola. What is it? Not .com. It's
I'm
getzola.org.
Getzola.org. So the name did sound familiar. Let me see. So yeah, it's listed. I'm going to our doc site, our documentation. Yeah, one of our team members has evidently added it to one of our supported frameworks. I see it in our docs.layer0. There's a guide on using it. That's awesome. I knew it sounded familiar. So what's interesting is you mentioned it's written in Rust, so it's got to be extremely fast. Why did you go towards that over Astro? What about Astro seemed too heavyweight for you?
So I actually liked Astro and didn't really have a problem with it. I was just kind of playing around with a few different ones. And in the site, it had Zola listed right after Astro.
Yeah.
So I kind of like abandoned Astro because I also haven't played with Rust at all. So I wanted to just kind of dig in that way and see what was going on. And then when I threw some files in and went to build it and saw that this is a site that would take like 8 minutes on Gatsby to build, and this literally built in seconds, I was like, okay, let me go back and see what's going on. So I don't have any sites actually live yet, but I'm pretty excited about it.
Is the like 8 minutes, was that an exaggeration, or like you literally tried it, or from experience, like how many pages is this site?
Oh yeah, and like in Gatsby Cloud, it had about like 100 markdown files in it, and it was taking like 8 minutes to build. Extremely basic site. Where I went wrong, and I think why it took so long for it to build, is that I started with an outdated template from ThemeForest, actually, called Flexiblog, that hadn't been updated in a while. So I kind of had to like band-aid it myself. So I think the slowness there is 100% from me band-aiding it. But what really appeals to me about Zola is there's no plugins. It's just a single binary, and it just works.
Yeah, that is, I think, very appealing. I think Hugo, if I'm correct, is similar in that regard, and I think Hugo is written in Go.
I liked Hugo too, but even Hugo was too advanced because I literally pretty much just need to display markdown files and images for the most part.
Got it. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at Zola's documentation. If you're like, I just need to get, I've got markdown files that I'm using with templating, either liquid templates or something similar, and I just need to, get this published out really quickly and I don't have a lot of JavaScript needs on my page, Zola looks like a good option. Is that an accurate description of the site you were trying to build?
Yes, that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Essentially, I have like a personal life wiki that it's just in Markdown files.
Yeah.
And I've been trying to go like platform and really tech stack agnostic. So I just wanted to get like as simple as possible. And I used to just have like a private repository on GitHub to back it up. Yeah. But I'm getting to the point now where maybe I want to hook a CMS up to it and actually be able to write to it and use it from different devices. So I kind of just use it to play around, really.
Got it. You know, so my bias would be to reach for something like 11D. And the reason is simply because the guts of the thing are written in JavaScript. And so if I need to do something, you know, weird that it doesn't support, then I feel like I could do it. But I might even start with something like Zola just to get started anyways, because it's a single binary, like you said, and it looks really simple and straightforward. It has most of what you need, and you're up and running really quickly. So that's really interesting. Oh, and it supports Sass. Yeah, it's got image processing. That's pretty good. I inevitably find in my experience, I want to customize something at some point, no matter what system or platform I'm on. And it just, I run up against those walls, and I want that ability to have an escape hatch, which is why I'd pick something like, I don't know, 11D for this. But Astro, I really like, because in a situation where it's not just Markdown, but it's also maybe I wanted something more component driven that'd be more sophisticated. Where I might be reusing the components and, you know, reusing a button or an interaction component across multiple pages. I really like how Astro is laid out in that way, but I don't know if it has, for example, the image processing built in and stuff like that. So, but for what you're describing, this looks like this and Hugo look like really good options. You should definitely do a pull request to submit it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And then I was also looking for Hacktober opportunities, so that would be fun.
Yeah, totally. Any other folks who have thoughts or on the recommendations made by What the Framework? It does seem like, especially for static, you know, it's one of the largest lists they've got, but there could have been, you know, more added here. Like Hugo actually appears to be on their list of static sites, or static site generators. So there's definitely a lot that potentially could be added here.
Kind of interesting, you know, yeah. what just kind of go back to what man was talking about, you know, yeah. It's, would you consider that like a progressive type structure where, you know, you're working from HTML to JavaScript to components, you know, adding things in? Is that considered like a progressive approach?
Technically, I would call that progressive, though when people think of progressive, they might think of a different journey. The best example, going back to what Daniel had mentioned earlier about frameworks, is Vue has a very progressive approach. Like it isn't necessarily about processing. Like in Matt's case, he's taking a series of Markdown documents and he's trying to turn them into web pages. And
right.
Yeah, this is really well done for that. But, you know, if you start with just simple HTML, CSS, and JavaScript,
right,
and you don't have Vue doing everything on your page, Vue is a great option, because you can just say, oh, this part of the page is it. You don't even need to have like bundling and a tool chain and Webpack set up. You can just, you know, add the script tag, and then there's a really easy way. And so Vue, I think they still do, used to call themselves a progressive framework. It's very easy to adopt it, very piecemeal.
Got it. So that's cool. Yeah, and you know, it's kind of cool though, because I when Daniel said that, I started thinking about Vue, and I was like, you know what, the one or two times that I did mess with Vue, it was very easy, because like Daniel said, it's like so easy to, you know, write in that, right? Because it's like, the reason why is because it's just like you could throw HTML and CSS in there just like anything else, right? And it's just it's so cool. And then it also made me think of last week, or yeah. Anyway, I was speaking with one of the co-founder of Enhance on Space, and talking about its progressive structure and how it it's progressive by nature, and that's why they developed it or whatever that way. And also, the interesting topic came up about how they designed it that way so that they're more friendly as far as from a accessibility viewpoint, which is kind of cool. That's a big thing that they were talking about, was accessibility as well. And then I brought up the fact of, well, it's also so the accessibility as far as being able to work on all these different devices and things, right? But also accessible from allowing newer developers to utilize a framework because it's easy to write it, right? Like just like Vue as well. But it's progressive, so you can build onto it. You can add web components. You can add different JavaScript later, per se, right?
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. One of the things it doesn't ask is like, how technically sophisticated are you? Like, where are you in your developer journey, so to speak?
Yeah.
What does your team structure look like? When you're in an enterprise context, those are key considerations as to what framework you pick. And, I need to know, like, I'm going to build a complex site that is going to need a lot of interactivity, and I'm going to have to reuse a lot of, I don't know what the right word would be, like components or interactivity. I don't have to imagine I'm going to build Gmail, right? There's no way I'm going to like create the in-browser editor and all the different components myself. I need to use something like that. I want to have an ecosystem that has all those components for me, which is why people often go to React. But another key, for instance, like, how good are you at making things look good? Like, that's a key thing for me as well. And
right.
So because I'm
Do you have to use Tailwind, or
yeah, exactly.
or are you bootstrapping this thing, or
yeah, like what are the theming options it works best with, or what are the UI libraries that are most popular? Like it would, it should almost, maybe after you've picked the framework, be like, okay, here are the UI libraries that are recommended, which is yet another, the rabbit hole keeps going deeper.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's a really good call out. Yeah, the term progressive, can have so many meanings. You're right. It has it from we just talked about it with Vue from the developer experience standpoint. The developer can kind of adopt pieces of Vue gradually. And then there's, for the user, progressive enhancement refers to really the ability to make sure the page is functional with just the basics of HTML and CSS and doesn't require JavaScript to function. You kind of add support for all those things layered on, but if some feature is missing, the entire web page doesn't break. And Enhance is very interesting as well, I think, because they're basing.
Yeah, we might get they actually reached out to me after I had that talk with them, so we'll probably have them on JavaScript Jam here
let's get them on.
We will.
Because what's interesting about Enhance is, if I recall correctly, it's based on, let me pull up the docs. I think it uses web components as its foundation. And there's been mixed traction with web components and custom elements. And there's a really good blog post I read over the last week saying it's still not time for web components, and then I read another one that obviously had the different view. So I'm really curious to see what they think. As I've mentioned before, the biggest challenge I've had with them is server-side rendering. But you're right, that's a good dimension. Is there other dimensions besides developer experience and ecosystem that that should be called out, or would be other questions to ask here? when you're picking a framework that we haven't covered or that this site isn't asking?
I am just checking it out. Give me a second.
Yeah.
Did you make this?
No, it looks like
Okay.
something I would make.
Yeah, it does. It looks like an Ishan special.
Yeah, it does. It really does. So that's why you need a theming library. No, this is somebody who.
That's awesome.
Yeah, no. So when I said simple site, I meant it. No, somebody else that I linked to in the newsletter wrote it.
Oh, that's right. I do remember that.
Yeah, she wrote
cool.
this. I changed my mind about writing new frameworks, and it got a lot of traction in a lot of places. Her homepage is better styled than this. So clearly, she knows what she's doing. I think this is just like the start of something.
Yeah.
Or
Right.
maybe she made it simple
cool.
so like people like me who have no style can contribute to it. And then they'll go make it look nicer. I really like the idea though, because like to do MVC, gives you the same application multiple ways, but it doesn't help, especially a non-technical person or somebody just getting in to figure out, what is the right framework and the why of these frameworks. Like why you can look at the code for the two different versions of 2MVC and you'll be like, well, which one makes the most sense for me? But it doesn't, answer enough of the whys like this one does.
Yeah.
And really, another thing I thought about though too is it answers the question of what, right? And so like when you're going through this, I know you could definitely probably think of several different like avenues to go down, and so therefore other questions to include. But with this being a kind of like a minimally viable kind of thing here, I guess it's like the great thing is that it takes you out of the what should I do mode and into a take action mode. It's the almost like the mediator between you and doing the work, right? And so it will help you to just start. I don't know. That's what I see as a potential good thing as well from this.
I like
to see that.
No, it does. Because what we were talking about is there can be analysis paralysis on
exactly.
like which frame. Like I'm going to do a blog. How many people Anthony, who's often a regular guest, just tweeted the other day, and I think he had gone through in 2 years 7 different frameworks. Maybe it was 5, right? Just building his own personal blog. And I actually personally have wrestled with this. Mine is still actually, people will throw tomatoes at me. Mine is an AMP. You want to overcome that analysis paralysis. And this, I also like that though, that this starts with the what you're building too, which keeps you focused on why you're focused. So that's, or why you're doing what you're starting. What may be useful is like a get started button. Well, what happens when you click on one of these, it does send you to the docs and GitHub. Maybe it'd be like starter example would be
right. It would like throw you into VS Code.
I feel like this is also kind of contributing to some of the problems and learning in this space. Is that I feel like engineers, especially junior engineers in their early stages when they're first picking up everything, it's like shiny object syndrome. They see something, they want to try it out. They see the next thing, oh, that looks better, because they're probably stuck on something. They go to the next thing, and it's just a constant try, test, come to no conclusion, go to the next thing, learn a little bit, but they don't ever master any of them. And I feel like that even with companies, a lot of people who have specialized. Let's say you've been using Next for the last 5 years. Well, you're likely using Next because you've been paid to use Next. Like that's what your contract or your employment or whoever you're currently working for is using, and that's why you've developed bias towards Next or Nuxt or Vue or whatever it might be. Oftentimes that bias, that specialty and mastering a framework really comes from being paid to master, in the long term. And I feel like that makes it a little bit more difficult for those starting off, like to really choose, because it's not that there's a clear and concise choice. It's, what can get you a job, what can get you in the door. And even if you have to switch frameworks on employment, which happens all the time, I mean, you're going to end up developing preference towards whatever you're working on every day. Like, they're all basically the same at the end of the day.
Yeah, sometimes it helps to have that choice kind of handled for you, so it forces you to bother
like
to learn.
if you're choosing between frameworks, you're probably not even at the point of qualification to make that choice, especially like if you're at like a job. Like, you shouldn't be leading a team unless you know exactly why you're picking something. Like, you know what I mean? I feel like that at least.
Yeah, I don't think, but to be fair, I don't think anyone's going to use this to pick the framework for a team. I think this is maybe somebody getting started, and
for sure.
maybe a hobby project, or they're trying to figure out what to use for their blog.
Yeah, I guess like just from my perspective, when I went through learning, I feel like I was just thrown all over the place, trying everything out, just pick up, drop, until I had a contract where it was like, okay, I'm going to stick to this because I'm being paid to do this. That's, and I feel like it completely stunts the growth of your engineering journey when you're constantly picking up new frameworks. Like, you're not learning anything new. You're learning the same 5 steps on 5 different frameworks. And what will be better is progressing beyond step 5 to step 15, step 20, step 25. Like, how do you actually accomplish the entire application, not how to start an application.
That's true, and that's actually kind of a difficult thing for which we'll talk more of next week, folks. If you're wanting to hear more about DevRel in the world here of JavaScript and web development, join us next week as well. We'll be diving in with a special guest whom we'll be announcing in the newsletter. So that'll be cool, and we'll probably tweet about it as well. So keep an eye out for that. But I very much agree with Daniel on that. I mean, when you're paid to do it, you're probably gonna focus more on it, right? And not just that,
focuses the mind.
Yeah, and it eliminates your it eliminates you having to even look into anything else because you don't have a choice. It's like, hey, this is what you gotta do. So
it makes you miss the Rails days. Like, when Rails was the popular choice, like, it was obvious why. Like, you just picked it because it got shit done. Like, that was the main objective, and it did it all, and nothing else really touched it at the time.
And now everything gets stuff done. And
so you're gonna love. So this is like me taking the opposite approach. So the reason I like Astro so much is because it lets you not make the decision. It's like you pick Astro, and then you still have yet another choice. Like, I can use React for this page. I can use Vue for this other page. I can continue being the dilettante,
and I think it's because you're in that stage in your career in your life where you have the ability to make those decisions, and you know why you'd want to make those decisions. So you want to leave it open if you want to put some web components in this specific area, and so this allows you to do that. Then you're going to go that route. Whereas if it's more limiting, like Rails, right, or whatever, then you probably don't want to choose that method because you're thinking, well, what if I want to do this in the future and I can't now? Now I got to switch, right?
Yeah. Well, thank you for not being the therapist and saying you have a fear of commitment. So
that's 100% true.
Yeah. Well, I think we're right at time on that note. So, Scott, I'll let you take us out.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you all so much for joining us today. Greatly appreciate it. Like I said, join us next week because we're going to be talking about DevRel stuff, and it's going to get exciting. I promise you it's going to have a bunch of people in this room speaking about DevRel. I'll probably get all the DevRels up in here. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us for today, though. We had a great time talking about what the framework.dev, what that means for you, what it could mean, what it might not mean, the things that they might be able to do to improve upon it, or maybe we should just leave it as it is because maybe it's not so flashy because everything else is so flashy. Interesting. All right. Don't think too hard on that one. Pun intended. Thank you all so much for joining us. Remember, we do this every Wednesday, 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we love you all so much. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you.
See you, everybody.
All right. Thanks y'all so much. See you next time.